Hi, everybody. I am. Why is it making that sound? Okay. I am Skip Alzheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime streaming show, where we watch old 16mm film. And that was a home movie of a trip from Texas to all the way up to Massachusetts. I couldn't identify at the end. I was kind of half looking at the screen, half doing some other work, but they drove a long way. They hit DC, they hit New York City, they hit quite a few places. And what's interesting is there's a lot of trips like that where people go up. They basically go from wherever they are in the country, and then they go up and then do the corridor where they go to Virginia, they go to historic Williamsburg, they go, boop, 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 all the way up. And some of them then veer over and go to Niagara Falls and go dip their toe in Canada and then come back. Lots of home movies do that. It's really kind of interesting. All right. Let's see what we got here. So many films. Let's learn about paper and pulp making. Enjoy.
Did you know that it would take all the forest you see to make the paper for just one issue of a big magazine? For trees are the major source of the pulp from which paper is made. Paper is growing more and more important in our world. More things are printed for us to read, and paper is important to communication of ideas. More paper and cardboard are used in wrapping food and other products. Paper is important to our distribution systems. And pulp and paper products are being put to new uses in construction. To meet this growing need, the pulp and paper industry has drawn on a wide variety of trees: spruce, fir, hemlock, balsam, poplar, and even some hardwood trees. The kind of a tree determines to some extent the kind of paper that can be made from it. About 100 years ago, the paper industry began to cut spruce forests in New England for pulpwood. Before that, practically all paper was made from old rags. The cutting of pulpwood spread into Canada and across the north-central states. Later, in the Pacific Northwest, trees were cut for paper as the need grew. In northern mills, wood from nearby trees is easily treated to make pulp that is white. From such trees comes wood that can be made with a different process into rough newsprint. Newsprint, shipped in large rolls, makes up a large share of the paper industry and goes into newspapers and pulp magazines. As our use of paper grows, many of our forests are being depleted. The search for pulpwood is spread to the southern forests, where the pine trees grow thick and fast. This is a pine seedling, planted as a crop on a tree farm. In many parts of the country, replanting of trees conserves our forest supply. What a contrast to the times not long ago when land was completely cleared of trees to grow crops of food. Now we raise trees as crops. These southern pines are only 4 years old. These are just 12 years old. Some tree farms are cultivated by the paper industry, but 2/3 of our pulpwood comes from private landowners, from natural forests, and from small tree lots. Here begins the harvesting of the pulpwood crop. For years, pine trees have been made into dark pulp that goes into heavy paper, such as cardboard and paper bags. But the pine tree has recently come to the foreground for many of our lighter and better papers. Improved methods in making pine pulp have widened the uses to which these trees may be put in meeting our pulp and paper needs. Selective cutting leaves some trees to produce new seedlings in a natural way for future needs. And although the lumber industry needs long, straight trees, the pulp and paper industry can use scrub trees and even branches. Location of pulp mills depends on the nearness of their most important resource, trees, and their next most important, water. Although paper is made in a variety of ways, let's see how this mill operates to turn wood into pulp. Wood comes in by train and by truck, or floats in by water in certain locations. Here begins the making of pulp, the basic material for paper. The bark would make brown spots in the paper, so the barking drums tumble the wood sticks against each other to remove it. Once, bark was considered waste. Now, when it is scraped from the wood, it's burned in the boilers to help make steam. Before the wood can be turned into pulp, it must be cut into small chips by a heavy wheel with knives. Each of those sticks is 5 feet long. Or was 5 feet long. And now for the climb, up the slanting conveyor belt to the tall digester building. Parts of the wood are not useful in making paper. These chips are cut just the right size so that the cellulose fibers which we want can be easily separated under heat and chemical treatment in this pressure cooker. Controlled cooking turns the pulpwood chips into fibers in a few hours. Down below, technicians check the quality of the fiber, and it is washed free of chemicals and other unwanted materials. From this brown pine pulp, the color must be removed without destroying the strength of the cellulose fibers. Now comes the series of steps called bleaching. A little bleach, a little lighter. A little more, a little whiter. After many bleachings, the fibers finally come out white and with their strength undamaged. Pulp is a product often dried and sold to companies making clothing, plastics, and film, as well as to paper-making companies. The papermaker blends together the different pulps, often pine, plus other woods, to produce the hundreds of different kinds of paper we use. Although paper is sometimes made in the same plant as the pulp, it is often made in separate plants, located in the North Central and New England states. Paper-making plants, like pulp mills, must be located where large quantities of water are available. Here begins the mixing of different pulps. Submerged beater knives are adjusted to shred the ends of the fibers. Other materials, such as clay, rosin, and starch, help give the paper a smooth surface, capable of holding ink. And here's the paper machine, the climax to this whole process. It takes the milky white substance and flows it evenly onto a wire screen. The screen shakes from side to side as it moves along, weaving the shredded fibers into paper. It's wet paper, so it's smooth and pressed and heated to dry it gradually as the sheet speeds on. After many more rollers, it's taken up in a pair of huge rolls. With a sharp jet of air, one roll is cut off and another started in a never-ending process. Machines in a mill like this seldom stop, but run day and night, 7 days a week. Some papers are given an extra pressing through heavy rollers when especially fine paper is wanted. And some are cut and trimmed to a variety of useful sizes. Some paper must be inspected carefully to be sure it is good enough for color printing on modern high-speed presses. And finally, it's wrapped, in paper, of course, for shipment. A lot of work has gone into this paper since it began as a seedling, either as a new kind of crop on a tree farm or as part of a natural forest or a farmer's woodlot. It has been work for foresters and for harvesters who, by selective cutting, try to conserve the forests for the future. It has been work for men at the pulp mill, where machines and chemicals have separated the cellulose fibers from the wood and have changed the natural brown color of the pulp to white. It's been work at the paper mill, where men and machines transform the watery stuff into an endless stream of paper to meet our growing needs. This is the story of paper and pulp making.
So you might say, like, wow, that's old technology. But I have friends who actually work in the pulp and paper science department at NC State, and they teach about this whole process, because the pulp can come from a variety of different places, and they make more than just paper. In particular, I was talking to one of my friends, and they were talking about making nitrate cellulose, which is what used to be the base for film back early on. It was the clear base. It is known to be incredibly flammable, and they were using it to make something essentially flash paper. And I said, I wonder if you guys could make a nitrate cellulose base that we could then put like film emulsion on, and then make new nitrate film, and make it maybe like 8mm or 16 or Super 8, and then we could make some brand new nitrate film. Now this is a big deal for archivists, because almost all, I would say 99.99999% of 16mm is actually acetate or some variation on acetate or polyester, which is what they called early on safety film, because it wouldn't catch fire easily. And so to introduce a brand new series of films that are nitrate would be a headache to any archivist who's like, oh crap. That being said, there is a footnote, and supposedly there were some Russian 16mm that was cut down from 35mm nitrate stock, and so there is that little footnote of a couple of films or several films that are 16 and they're nitrate. All right, that was me geeking out a bunch, because that's what we do at AV Geeks, is we geek out. All right, so behind me I have a telecine, and we have a film set up on there, and this is Hen Hop. Enjoy.
Your feet on the floor and your back to the wall, and over the left with the corners all. Right hand to your partner, grand chain, go right, go left. Go right to the buggy, left to the wheel, go all the way around on the ball of your heel. Put your wooden leg up and your cork one down. Hurry up, girls, you'll never get round.
Norman McLaren, a wonderful Canadian animator who I think he predated National Film Board of Canada. He did work for the Canadian government, but then when National Film Board was created, he kept going. And I think that process was one where, it was like finger paint, where he would do it on some sort of glass or something, and then they inverted it using photochemistry. So, yeah. Let's learn about the properties of water. Enjoy.
Of all the compounds found in our universe, none is of greater importance than water. The chemical composition of water may be shown by the action of a direct electric current upon it. In electrolysis, the two electrodes are immersed in water which contains a small amount of sulfuric acid to increase conductivity. Volume of gas formed at the negative electrode burns with an almost colorless flame. This gas is hydrogen. The second gas formed at the positive electrode causes a glowing splinter to break into flame. This gas is oxygen. You must remember that the 2-to-1 ratio of hydrogen to oxygen, as shown by this experiment, is only by volume and not by weight. The boiling of water may be demonstrated in this flask. Through the stopper of the flask, we place an outlet for the steam, an open U-tube with mercury to serve gauge, and a thermometer. The thermometer is not placed in the liquid, but is suspended in the vapor above the surface. Heat is applied. At first, the air and other gases that are dissolved in the water rise to the surface in tiny bubbles. The temperature, as shown by the thermometer, begins to rise. Soon, bubbles of steam form on the bottom of the flask. Eventually, as the water is heated, the bubbles reach the surface of the liquid, and the water is said to boil. The temperature now becomes constant. Notice that the steam in the flask is invisible to the eye. However, as it leaves the outlet, it forms a cloud or mist. This cloud, commonly but mistakenly known as steam, is actually water which has been condensed by the cool air. Now let us partly close the steam outlet. The confined steam builds up a pressure within the flask as shown by the U-tube. The boiling point increases as the pressure becomes greater. It is apparent that an increase in pressure causes an increase in the boiling point. We now remove the burner and allow the water to cease boiling. A vacuum pump reduces the pressure as shown by the U-tube. Once again, the water boils, this time at a temperature lower than the original boiling point. Lessening the pressure always lowers the boiling point of a liquid. The Liebig condenser is a glass tube surrounded by a water jacket. The circulation of cold water is necessary to maintain a low temperature within the condenser tube. The container at the left is a distilling flask. In the top of the flask, we have inserted a thermometer to measure the boiling point of the liquid. The invisible water vapor or steam moves into the Liebig condenser, where it condenses into drops as it is cooled by the circulating water. The liquid from the inner tube is called the distillate and is free from all non-volatile impurities. Let us take a glass of cold water and allow it to reach room temperature. The solubility of gases decreases with an increase in temperature. 1 hour passes before we again examine the water. We note that bubbles of gas have formed on the sides of the container. These bubbles are formed from the air that was originally dissolved in the water. Fish are able to live because of the dissolved oxygen in water. They have no ability to separate the oxygen that is chemically combined with the hydrogen. When we relieve the pressure in this bottle by opening it, the gases dissolved under pressure are released. Solutions may consist of 2 or more liquids. To illustrate, let us pour some water into this container. Now, let us add some alcohol to the partially filled beaker. You will note that the liquids appear to dissolve in each other. The alcohol and water are mutually soluble. Such liquids are said to be miscible. Not all liquids, however, behave in the same manner. Let us pour some oil into this cylinder. Now, we add water to the oil in the cylinder and observe that the results this time are quite different. The liquids do not mix. Layers are formed that persist even though the mixture is stirred. Liquids which are not soluble in each other are said to be immiscible. Temporary suspensions of immiscible solutions are emulsions. Salad dressings are forms of such emulsions. The cleansing action of soap is due in part to its emulsifying properties. Let us consider the solubility of solids by stirring copper sulfate into water. The solid copper sulfate dissolves in the liquid, forming a clear solution. The water or any other substance doing the dissolving is the solvent, and the substance dissolved is the solute. Eventually, we reach a point where no more solute can be dissolved at that temperature. We now have a saturated solution. We evaporate part of the solvent, and almost immediately crystals of copper sulfate are precipitated from the solution. Here you see them forming on the sides of the container as the water is evaporated. If the evaporation takes place very slowly, the size of the crystals is increased. The crystals have the definite shape of geometric figures. We may separate the crystals from the solution, called the mother liquor, by a filtering process. The contents of the dish are poured on a filter paper suspended within a funnel. The solution, which is still saturated with the solute, passes through the filter and is now called the filtrate. The crystals, known as the precipitate, are held on the filter paper. Almost all solid materials are more soluble in warm water than in cold. Here is a test tube filled with a concentrated solution of potassium nitrate. The tube is cooled by a stream of running water. The solute crystallizes out of the solution as the temperature is lowered by the water. After the solution becomes saturated due to the lowering of the temperature, any further cooling causes crystallization. The solvent at the end of the experiment is still saturated. Not all compounds react in this way. For example, If we drop a small seed crystal into this solution of sodium thiosulfate, crystallization takes place immediately. When crystallization once starts, it continues until the solvent is once more merely saturated. There is a decided increase in temperature during this process of crystallization. The weight of 1 cubic centimeter of water, the size of the cube you see in the hand, is the standard of weight in the metric system. This volume of water has a mass of 1 gram, the basic unit of weight. A common unit of volume is the liter, which is approximately 1 quart. It contains 1,000 cubic centimeters. 1 liter of water weighs 1 kilogram, or 2 2/10 pounds in English units. The ratio of the weight of a substance compared to the weight of an equal volume of water is called the specific gravity. The hydrometer is used in comparing the densities of liquids. Solid materials, such as this cylinder, are sometimes weighed in air and in water to determine their volumes and densities. Energy changes in the form of heat play an important part as water changes its physical forms. Ice is added to the water in this test tube, and a thermometer is inserted. The ice begins to melt. The temperature drops to 0 degrees centigrade, which is the freezing point of water. It is apparent that heat energy must have been absorbed in the melting of ice. The cooling effect in an icebox is due only to the melting of the ice crystals. Now we insert a test tube of water into a freezing mixture. The temperature falls even below the 0 reading. The tube is shaken and the water quickly freezes to ice. The temperature rises rapidly. This energy that is released when ice is formed and is absorbed when it melts is the heat of fusion of water. Careful experiments, such as this one, show that the heat of fusion of water is about 80 calories. A calorie is the amount of heat needed to raise 1 gram of water 1 degree centigrade. Equally important are the energy changes involved in the relationship of steam to water. Experiments of this type show that the heat of vaporization is about 540 calories. The steam heating plant is a common application of this important principle. Water is changed into steam in the boiler of this heating plant as heat is absorbed. In the radiator, the steam is condensed back to water, releasing heat energy which warms the room. You have seen some of the more important chemical and physical properties of water. In your further experiment, study and discuss this most important of all compounds.
Net for that. Yeah. More than you ever wanted to know about the properties of water. So behind me again, I have the telecine hooked up, and we're going to watch this film called Run for Your Life. I think this was part of the first jogging craze, and the rise of athletic shoes. So enjoy.
When I got my heart attack, I realized that because you were so young and figured it could happen to you at that age.
This man is Herman Roberts. To have a heart attack at 29, the degeneration of his arteries must have started when he was perhaps a teenager. In fact, scientists have discovered heart and blood vessel disease can start in the early teenage years. We're going to test a group of teenagers from a major metropolitan high school to measure the condition of their cardiovascular system. All have some involvement in school sports. One is a wrestler, another a football player, 2 are cross-country runners. These suction cups are attached to wires which feed an electrocardiogram to monitor the heart. Then the student is put on a treadmill. He's told to run until he's exhausted.
Just feel the feet with one foot. Don't put your weight on. Feel the feet first.
This breathing apparatus allows our scientists to measure with great precision how much oxygen our student wrestler takes into his body and uses in the muscles and tissues. What we're measuring is his oxygen uptake, the ability of the body to take up and use oxygen efficiently. Many doctors now believe this is the most accurate way to assess the fitness of the body. A national survey says 30% of teenagers play no sports at all, and another survey says teenage girls get only 10 minutes of strenuous activity a day, while boys get only 20 minutes a day. But we haven't picked a group of softies because all our volunteers play sports. This girl is a cross-country runner. Her oxygen uptake is 41.1 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram per minute, and that's an acceptable level for a girl of her age. The boys range between 45.5 and 50.7. Now, with the help of the school coach, we'll see just how much each can improve oxygen uptake.
So what we're going to do today for our running bit, because of the weather conditions, we'll be working inside, and we're going to work on staircases. Now obviously if we're working inside, you won't have completely a half hour of running, but we will run, by doing interval training, we will run a certain distance through the hallways and up and down the staircases, and then we'll take a certain amount of time rest, a certain interval. And then we'll
This is the school vice principal, George Tavel. He's had a heart attack, yet he's more fit than his students.
We will hope to have measured that your cardiovascular fitness will have improved quite appreciably. And the only thing you're going to get out of this is a lot of good health, nothing else.
Diamond Head Mountain in Hawaii, site of the second Pacific Rim Marathon race. 4 Olympic runners and 331 other contestants have gathered here for this most exacting test of the mind and body. Herman Robers and Vice Principal George Tavel and 7 other heart attack victims have come 6,000 miles for the run. They've spent a week acclimatizing themselves to the food and the heat. The man responsible for developing this running regimen for heart attack victims is Dr. Terry Cavanaugh, Medical Director of the Toronto Rehabilitation Center. Among his hundreds of post-heart attack patients, 10 have trained themselves for marathon running.
I wouldn't doubt at all that the incidence of coronary artery disease in marathon runners is very, very small. It's not possible to train and run a marathon and have the sort of lifestyle that seems to contain the risk factors of heart disease.
It's now the afternoon before the race. Some of the runners are beginning to show the tension before this grueling event. Our 9 marathoners range in age from 33 to 56. Each has had 1 heart attack. 2 of them have had 2 heart attacks, and 1 has had a major heart operation. The wives of the runners and assistants from the Rehabilitation Center examine the race course. They'll be supplying the runners with water en route, including a liquid mineral supplement. It's now 6:30 in the morning, and the race begins.
Run for your life. You can't cheat the devil today. Run for your life. Such an easy price to pay. You got a future. No more pain and tears. You can live your life much looser when you run away you feel. Oh, now, if you just run for your life.
I don't know, looking back at it, I contributed mainly to stress, smoking a lot, doing no physical exercise whatsoever. I had quite an intensive job. I was traveling across Canada. It was early planes in the morning, late at night with customers, and we had just bought a home, we had saved hard to get a home, and I think all these things together finally contributed to the heart infarct.
Run for your life. You know it's never, never, never too late to start. 'Cause you got a future.
And now I'm seen to recognize certain danger signs. You know, for instance, when you drive on the highway and a guy cuts in front of you, you know, I think don't get excited or don't get upset. But before that, it was uptight. You know, I'm gonna get him. And now I don't care anymore, or I try not to. You know, you have to teach yourself to take it easy. I mean, it's not worth it.
It's 9 a.m. The temperature is 80 degrees, and we're 20 miles into the race. These runners will lose between 4 and 10 pounds by the end of the marathon, and they'll drink about 2.5 quarts of water. This is the last watering station before the end. They've come 25 miles now, the young and the old. To fight the heat, runners douse themselves and gulp what they can on the run. And here comes Herman with his wife Annette pedaling beside him. The end is in sight, but the agony of the exertion is beginning to show.
Yeah, because I think it would cool you off nicely.
The temperature is near 84 degrees now, and every fiber is fighting for oxygen. Herman's oxygen uptake is a staggering 63, up by about 50% after his heart attack, and well above the level of our high school students, 18 years his junior.
No, I don't think fill it up. I think this, one more. This is fine. Thanks very much.
Last 100 yards as hundreds of spectators watch at Kapiolani Park in Honolulu. To train for this event, Herman runs 10 miles a day, 7 days a week for months. His condition is superb. '51st in a field of 335 runners, an heroic accomplishment for a man who had a heart attack only 3.5 years before. He finished the race in 3 hours, 15 minutes, 31 seconds, and won 2 trophies.
I liked sports, but later on when I got older, late teens, I think my interest from sports diminished and I started looking more at girls and, you know, some other things, more of the pleasures of life, and I think that's when it really started. Before my heart attack, I couldn't do more than 8 push-ups. For a guy who was 28, 29 years old, that's crazy. It should have been a warning. But well, who thinks about it when he's 28 or 29 years old? It can happen.
16-year-old Jim Sherman is taking his final test after 3 months of increased endurance activity, and his results show a phenomenal increase in oxygen uptake. Jim decided to get his 30 minutes of endurance activity by running to and from school. That took 15 minutes. Then he'd run for another 15 minutes in his neighborhood. But running isn't the only way to boost oxygen uptake. Here are some of the other activities he could have chosen: basketball, cross-country skiing, swimming, tennis and other racket sports, soccer and cycling. The secret is picking one that makes him sweat and breathe hard. And when he exercises his body, he exercises his heart. Now the coach has assembled Jim and his 5 classmates to hear the results.
When we started this running program with you about 3 months ago now, we were trying to see if we could improve your oxygen uptake, that is the ability of the body to make use of the oxygen that is taken in. And so we tested you to start the whole program, and we just retested you in the past week, and I think the results are quite significant. Chris?
And significant they are. The group as a whole was able to increase oxygen uptake by a remarkable 6.9%. This group of high school athletes was already in pretty good shape at the beginning of our experiment, but over the course of 3 months, through 30 minutes of endurance activity a day, they were able to increase the ability of their bodies to use oxygen, to get oxygen into all the cells of the muscles. What the result means to our students is that their bodies are now in better physical condition than when they started. Actually, for their age, their oxygen uptake is above average now, even though it's still below the comparative level of the 9 heart attack victims who ran the Hawaiian Marathon. Their hearts are stronger now. They'll beat more slowly. They can participate in sports with more apparent energy for longer periods of time. It also means they're on the road to forestalling problems with their cardiovascular system, the heart, and the vessels which carry the blood throughout the body. Their body tissues are in tip-top shape. We've left the best part to the last. The student who was least active made the most remarkable recovery. It shows that people in the worst physical condition have the greatest potential for improvement. But we'll let Coach Shepard tell you about Jim.
James, you only went from 45.3 to 61.5, which is only a 35% increase. And I don't think this indicates anything else except you worked pretty darn hard at it and you've had a fantastic result here. So you've got a 35% increase while the rest of us had to level off about 6.9. I think the thing we have shown is that with a little bit of work, and it's not a lot of work, I'm only asking you to do 30 minutes a day, that you can improve your total fitness, which I think you've all done, and we'll continue on to improve it even more so that you can be old and gray like Mr. Cavell and I.
The American Medical Joggers Association has determined that there has never been a case of a fatal heart attack in a person who's capable of running a marathon, even if he had a pre-existing diagnosis of cardiovascular disease. Run for your life. You can't cheat the devil today. Run for your life. Such an easy price to pay. You got a future. No more pain and tears.
$75. Yes, that is a great toe tapper candidate, but we are already in the throes of our 2022 toe tapping tournament. Here it is right here. Excuse me. So in the left column is our first round, On the Way to School versus I Am Me and I Want to Be, Ducks versus Handy Dandy Filmmaking Film, Choosing What to Make versus Vandalism, the Truck Song versus the Education Today rap. Some of you, I've seen your faces or your names on the comments and would love for you to tune in and watch the first round and vote, and I put that in the comments. Likewise, the second round, I'm also putting in the comments. You'll have until Sunday to vote. So the second column, round 2, Never Say You Can. You Can't Until You Try versus Me and the Monsters. World of Work versus Telezonia's Put Your Finger In. Mulligan Stew's Flim Flam Man song versus AC Delco's 1973 Spring Campaign. And Body Talk, Breathing and Talking versus Snacking, Garbage in Your Gut. I would say that there's some films where the songs are definitely winners. Like people have really Made It Known, which is a better song. And there's some that are kind of like back and forth. So if you haven't voted yet, I really would love for you to vote and email me and say hi. I have to end the broadcast a little early today because I have a meeting that's right at 2 o'clock. But thanks for tuning in today. Thank you so much, Burrow Owl, for the coffee. You can buy us coffee at ko-fi.com/avgeeks. You can also go to avgeeks.com and see things that we have online. Thousands of things that we've digitized over the last several years. And you can also buy DVDs. Another thing you could do that doesn't cost any money at all is to hit the thumbs up button, the like button, the subscribe button, share this, and always comment. So we will see you again tomorrow. I have 2 shows tomorrow. One is a regular lunch show, and one is with the Hunt Library. So everybody have a great rest of your day. We will see you soon. Take care.